Hey boys and girls, back again with some more Civil War here. So we looked at the West Coast or the Western Theater before, and it looked like the Union was doing pretty well and starting to get some success out there in 1862. But now we're going to look back at the Eastern Theater again, over here on the East Coast, mostly in the vicinity of Virginia. Um, so about the middle of 1862, and spring through summer, the campaign kind of wraps up down here with McClellan leading his army through this York James Peninsula on towards Richmond, which is right here. And I'll mark that with an R. His target was Richmond right there, and he's trying to march through. But as we saw before, he was a very slow, cautious commander. General Lee was appointed as the Confederate commander, and he was much more bold, a much better leader for his guys, and he's mostly able to push McClellan out of that peninsula. So that was really bad for McClellan. If you remember, McClellan was the golden boy. He was the savior that was going to come in and fix everything, and now his name has been tarnished. So Lincoln is very frustrated with General McClellan, and his star has fallen to a certain extent. So McClellan here was the commander of everything over here for a while, but he gets pushed down, and then Halleck is now the commander in charge. All right, so McClellan's just sort of in charge of the remnants of the Army of the Potomac down here. But if you remember, Washington, D.C. is real close by. D.C. is only right up about there. I'll circle it with this color. So D.C. is only right up here, so it's really that short distance between the two national capitals, and there's significant Union forces up here. Lincoln wants to use those soldiers, so he puts this other guy, Pope, in charge. Pope is the kind of person who likes to brag a lot, and he's a loudmouth and a hotshot kind of guy. He's not real popular with a lot of people for that reason, but he's perceived to be a good commander, and he's going to be more aggressive than the overcautious McClellan. So Pope's put in charge of an offensive that's supposed to push down in this direction from northern Virginia down towards the Richmond area. While this is happening, McClellan's troops are starting to filter back on boats through the waterways of the Chesapeake back up to the D.C. area. So Pope starts coming down here. Now, General Lee in the South has a problem because he's got most of his soldiers down in this vicinity, and now he's facing a new threat coming from this direction. So he divides his army. That's mostly against the rule book for being a combat commander. You're not supposed to divide your forces in the face of the enemy, but Lee understands that the rule book for a combat commander it's a guideline. It's not an absolute rule necessarily. So he has a lot of confidence in General Stonewall Jackson. He sends him up in charge of his blocking force that's going to come up and intercept General Pope as he's coming down from the Washington, D.C. area. So the opposing forces meet here at Second Manassas or Second Bull Run, just sort of like south and generally west of D.C., August 28th and 29th of 1862. So initially, some scouts report to Pope that they found General Jackson's army. For some reason, Pope thought that the army was heading in a different direction, away from him, towards the mountain passes that are out here in the western reaches of Virginia. He couldn't have been more wrong. Stonewall Jackson was there. He was getting ready to fight, and they launched an offensive against Pope. It's pretty good at first. They push a lot of Pope's forces aside. They actually slowed down their attack because they took over Pope's train wagon of supplies, food, uniform stuff, boots, like all those kind of supplies and things that an army needs. And the rebel army was always short of supplies. They were short of food and everything else. So they stopped and actually raided this wagon train for a while and took everything they could eat or carry with them on the move, and then just kind of burned the rest so the Union soldiers could use it. After that, there's more of a sharp fight right here in this area, and Second Bull Run was actually worse than First Bull Run or First Manassas if you're from the South, right? So it was a bigger battle. There were much higher casualties. It was a much worse defeat for the North. So here's General Pope. All right, he's the commander for the North. CDR's commander. Northern commander's Pope. Southern commander for this one is Jackson. The Northerners have 63,000 guys as they attack and go into combat. Southerners, as usual, they have a few less, 55,000. But look at the casualty count. Casualties, over 13,000 for the North. 13,000 guys getting shot or killed or whatever is casualties. And your casualties for the South is just a shade under 9,000 guys getting shot or wounded there. So who wins, who loses? The North lost that one badly, and the South won big time. And what are the effects? You know, a lot of these battles lead to something else or something bigger, but what you see for effects here is that General Lee is going to go over onto the offensive. He's going to go over onto the offensive with the Confederate Army. He's going to attack the North now. That wasn't their strategy before. They were going to hang back, fight a defensive war, but now Lee is convinced that his army is so good and the Union Army is so bad that he can go and attack the North and essentially take over part of it, knock them out of the war. Also, there could be political considerations too for elections and things like that. If certain politicians get elected resulting from a Confederate victory in the North, they might pull the North out of the war, and in effect, we would have two countries here in North America, or what's now the United States, I should say, the Confederate States of America and the United States of America. But what we'll look at next time is the Battle of Antietam, when Lee goes on to the offensive, and there's a huge battle in Maryland, September 17th, known as the bloodiest day in American history. And also at the end of 1862, there's another battle called the Battle of Fredericksburg, down here along the Rappahannock River in kind of like North or maybe Central Virginia. We'll look at those next time. Thanks. Bye-bye.